All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Millennials Are Old podcast. And you know what, Brian?
Yeah?
I think you and I would both agree that our political climate right now is really good.
Yeah, it's great. It's the best it's ever been.
You know, that's the thing, right? The Republican primary debate just happened last night in the city that I live in. I should say last night as of recording this episode. In the city that I live in, only a few blocks away from where I work, hilariously enough. And I can tell you it went off without a hitch. Everybody agreed that we were going in the right direction.
What was your favorite moment from the debate?
My favorite moment from the debate was when everybody on stage agreed that material issues are the most important and petty culture war bullshit wasn't important anymore.
My favorite was when they talked about all the pedos and how we were going to kill them all.
You know, I don't remember that part because we're living in the reality, remember, where politics is all really good.
Yeah, that's good to me, what I just said. Oh, I guess you think pedophiles are good, I guess.
You know, Brian, many people have said I'm a big fan of maps.
Audiences at home, this is funnier on more than one level. If you knew Taylor, is the thing.
Listen, all right, I just love geography, okay? That's the only thing that I'm referring to here. I'm not referring to the other Tumblr map, okay?
Taylor is a big advocate of maps. He's always trying to tell people about maps. He's always trying to show his friends maps.
All right, listen.
He's always saying maps are really useful.
They are. They help you
They've
get
really
around
guided
things.
him through a lot.
Oh, Jesus. With this segue out of the way, let's get into our review for this week, which is the 1998 political satire film Bulworth. Now, Brian, this was my choice for this week's episode. What did you know about Bulworth before I recommended it?
Nothing. You are my experience with Bulworth, Taylor. You are my experience with Bulworth. What I know about Bulworth is born in 91, and I read a lot of comic books. In the 2000s, early 2000s, when I was mostly reading comics, most of them were my brothers, and they were from the 90s, or they were bought in both from Toys R Us. And Bulworth was advertised a lot in mainstream superhero comics in the late 90s. And in retrospect, I don't know why, but I remember seeing just that image, this poster image, in comic book ads, and just being like, what the fuck is that? And I think probably assuming that it was like some sort of weird slacker comedy or horror movie, because again, I was a pretty young kid at the time. But in retrospect, that's even weirder. That the only thing I've seen Bulworth in before you started talking to me about it was in very mainstream comic books aimed at pretty much like arrested adolescents or like, you know, middle school aged or perpetual middle school aged men.
I mean, that's the thing, though, Brian. I think you and I can both agree, though, is that the poster for this movie is fucking fantastic.
It's awesome. It's like a Cronenberg film. It's, first of all, it is a very good poster, but it doesn't really tell you much about the movie. It tells you everything about the tone.
That is very true, yes. Although I will say that the poster, I think, represents very well on what Bulworth will become later on in the movie.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually had a question for you right off the bat. You've been talking about this movie to me for as long as you've seen it, I think.
Yeah, I think about 3 or 4 years
yeah,
ago.
I've literally and been talking about doing it on the show to me for I think as long as we've been talking about doing a show. Watching it, it kind of occurred to me, just knowing sort of your sensibilities and things. So you know how the Billy Jack movies, that's sort of like, I think like a good summation of where I'm kind of coming from with Millennials Are Old as a thing. It's like, these are like a bunch of my interests that kind of are cross-sectioned here that are tied to a very distinct era in time, and these movies could never be made again. And it really taps into all the stuff I like to talk about. Would you say Bulworth is kind of that for you?
Yes, 100%.
I thought so.
Because that's the thing, Brian. Obviously, we always talk about based libs on the show.
Yeah, they're a dying breed. We got to keep them, you know, in our spirits.
They can't be no ghosts. They have to be a spirit. No, never mind. I won't get into that right now. But that's the thing, though, is that Tom Laughlin is your based lib and Warren Beatty is my based lib. That's just how it's going to go, I guess.
And they're both pretending to be races that they aren't. They're both white guys pretending to be minorities. It's great.
That is actually very true. But no, that's the thing. So I've been talking about wanting to review this movie for a while, but spoilers to the audience ahead who have not listened to my other podcasts. I've already reviewed this movie for a different podcast, but I love this movie so goddamn much that I basically was like, Brian, just so you can watch this movie, we're going to do a fucking review of this. Because I needed you to fucking see this movie.
Yeah, I know. I needed to see this is the thing. And I'd known about it for a while. Again, from you. And then I think, so from you about 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah. I think even during COVID maybe is when you first started talking to me about it. You know, just early COVID maybe.
I believe so, yes.
And then I feel like it got sort of a reappraisal sort of online in the last year or so. And I kind of ignored all that because I knew I was going to watch it eventually. So I didn't really look into any of the reappraisal of it or whatever. But first of all, I want to say this is an awesome movie, but this is a mess of a movie. Not in the same way that like the Billy Jack films are. It's very competently made. It is a messy movie. Like it is a big fucking bold movie. And it is intentionally pretty uncomfortable at times.
Yes, it is a Bulworth in a china shop kind of a movie.
Oof.
But that's the thing though, right? Is that I think honestly, and I don't mean to give my pals and I over at Dick Proles too much credit, but honestly, we were like the first people online to give this film a reappraisal because I would say the first big podcast do appraisal of this movie was Chapo Trap House when they had Gangsta Boo on. But we came out with our episode way before they did. So, you know what? I'm going to take full credit. If Bulworth gets a like Blu-ray 4-disc edition like Funny Man did, it's because of me, motherfucker.
We're going to get right past this. Love Gangsta Boo, rest in peace, 3-6. They reviewed that movie because Felix was Twitter friends with Boo and he wanted to have her on the show. And so he needed to come up with an excuse to have her on.
That is 100% true.
I absolutely believe that.
She didn't even really watch the movie either. You can barely
see. I was actually not going to say that because she's not here to defend herself. Rest in peace, Gangsta Boo. Love you.
Absolutely.
But yeah, this I am glad I saw this movie because here's the thing. This is a relic of the era it was made, but like the Billy Jack films, particularly like we talked about this with Trial of Billy Jack, and I think it's similar, very tied to the era it's made, could never have been made, not a year before, not a year after. It's a miracle it got made, though.
Yes. In fact, I'm going to get into some trivia that will explain why it was a miracle it got released. But first, let's get into some details here. So you mentioned it couldn't come out a year before or after. This movie came out in 1998. It was rated R, very unsurprisingly. There's a lot of language in this film. It was directed by Warren Beatty. It was written by Warren Beatty and a gentleman named Jerry Pixar, and was produced by Warren Beatty again and a gentleman by the name of Peter Jan Brugge. I don't know anything about him, but I just posted it in there to give him full credit. And, you know, once again, we talked about Warren Beatty on the Bonnie and Clyde episode. He's a Hollywood legend, producer, actor, director, an auteur at all those things. He's fucking phenomenal at everything that he does in entertainment, basically. And also as well, this movie is about 108 minutes long. It had a budget of about $30 million and it grossed only $29.2 million, which the fact this movie even almost broke its budget is actually kind of impressive, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because this is a bizarre film, especially released in 1998. The fact that anybody saw this movie and the fact that it actually got generally pretty positive reviews is kind of mind-boggling.
The only ways you get to make a movie like this are either you're super independent and you're super low budget, and you can do whatever and no one's paying attention, or you're Warren Beatty at this point in his career, and you can literally do whatever you want because you can just afford to push it through.
I mean, that's really how it fucking is. And also, Tom Laughlin's the exact same fucking way with the Billy Jack movies. Because obviously, Born Losers, I think that could have happened, obviously, and it did happen. He was independent or whatever, but like a moderate, like, you know, fucking Corman-style studio could have done that. But the Trial of Billy Jack would have never been made by a major studio. Never.
He made that. And that's how I feel about Beatty and Bulworth. Is like, he pushed this movie through. He birthed it.
God, he fucking did. And then I was talking about critics earlier. On Rotten Tomatoes, it has a 76% critic score and a 68% audience score. So, once again, a pretty moderately critically successful movie. And, you know, we can certainly talk about some of the reviews later, but I'm just going to get one review out of the way. And thank you very much, Brian, for finding this earlier, just before we started recording. But Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert reviewed this, and Gene Siskel had a not retarded opinion for once, which I will say, to be fair, I think this was like a year before he died. So maybe he's like, oh man, I've been an asshole all my life. Maybe he should be less of a piece of shit.
I don't know enough about Siskel to like, I know that I disagree with his opinions on movies a lot, but you know, take at face value that he had a little bit of savviness about something or other.
And in fact, in that video that you sent me, the reason he's on the phone is because he was in the hospital for cancer treatment.
Yeah, I had a feeling. I didn't check that, but I figured it was something like that. Because they were in studio together all the time, right?
They usually were up until the last couple of years, yeah.
Yeah.
And he was basically in cancer treatment and like hospice and stuff. And, yeah. Once again, I don't wish death upon him. I don't wish pain upon him. But I'll just say that. At least you had a not retarded opinion once. So I'll give Gene Siskel that for once. A broken clock moment for Gene Siskel.
Exactly.
All right. Now, I was talking about some trivia earlier. So the first piece of trivia I have here is many objected to Warren Beatty hiring composer Ennio Morricone to write the score for the film. Now, I'm sure, Brian, you obviously know who Ennio Morricone is.
Oh, yeah.
And he actually does feature very, very slightly in the film, but it's literally one piece of music for like 2 minutes. The rest of the soundtrack is, oh boy, let's talk about this motherfucking soundtrack. So
yeah, this is crazy.
The lead single was Ghetto Superstar, which is a Pros Michael song featuring Maya and ODB of Wu-Tang.
Ain't nothing to fuck with.
But some of the other people featured on this album are Dr. Dre, LL Cool J, fucking Method Man, KRS-One, Prodigy, RZA, like Ice Cube.
Ice Cube, yeah. The
Black Eyed Peas, fucking, yeah,
early
Public
Black Eyed
Enemy.
Peas, yeah.
Be Real of Cypress Hill, Capadonna, like, holy shit.
This is a fucking stacked soundtrack. This is, every fucking track is a banger by a legend.
And you know what's even more bizarre about it, right? Is that, once again, this movie had a budget of about $30 million, which I think is roughly the equivalent of like $55 million today. What movie that has come out in the last 20 years other than this movie, like, since like 2007, okay, we'll go 2007 or later. What fucking movie from 2007 or later with a $50 million rounding budget has had any song be notable on the fucking soundtrack? None of them.
Yeah, no. Or even a notable soundtrack. The last one I could think of would be the Guardians movies, and those are all songs that are like old songs, whereas the songs on this soundtrack were like fresh.
Oh, yes, yep, Guardians, definitely.
But even that's different because, again, those were classic songs. The songs on Bulworth are like fresh by maybe a couple years when it comes out at the oldest.
Oh, no, for sure. And then also, like, you know, fucking Avatar 2 came out. It had a budget of like $500 million. The Weeknd had a song on the Avatar 2 soundtrack. But does anybody remember that Weeknd song?
I mean, I do, because I listen to a lot of The Weeknd, but it's a weak song from him.
And it's like, a movie that has a $500 million budget can't even get a song that breaks the fucking Hot 100 for like 3 weeks.
This is how most of these things feel now. You hear that and you're like, oh, this is a warmed over Weeknd song. Someone said, oh, do an action soundtrack. And he kind of did like, okay, I'll do some 80s synthesizers. And then he kind of just wrote lyrics that described the plot of the movie.
Yeah, Jesus Christ. And, well, to be fair, Ghetto Superstar does rap the plot of this movie to a certain
but that's
extent.
A great song.
It is a great song. And also, you know, talk about the importance of soundtracks. ODB performing this song live. He almost died performing this song live.
I mean, we can chalk up the number of times ODB almost died performing live, you know.
That's actually very true. But the story is that, like, Pros Michael and him were performing, I think, at the VMAs, and he almost got blown up by, like, pyrotechnics, and Pros Michael was like, just before the pyrotechnics exploded. He would have ended up like James Hetfield.
What a fucking charmed life for that man.
Yeah. Oh, Jesus. But yes, going back to the Ennio Morricone connection, one of the reasons that people were hesitant to hire Ennio Morricone was his hefty fee of about $1 million, and Beatty eventually won out over his producers. Despite all this, Morricone only has a little more than 10 minutes of his complete score featured in the final cut of the film, which is largely, once again, dominated by the fucking stacked rap soundtrack.
Really incredible.
And Morricone was not pleased with the end results of the film and what Beatty had done to his score, obviously, because he barely put his score in front of it.
Got paid for it.
Like, we need to be clear here. Public Enemy has more of a presence in the movie than fucking Ennio Morricone does.
It would be weird any other way in this film. It would be very not appropriate.
No, it would, because, like, spoilers to the audience who may have not seen this movie, Warren Beatty becomes a rapper in this movie. Like, could you imagine, like, symphonic music in the background where he's, like, rapping?
That would suck. I'm sorry.
That would be so fucking bad.
I mean, a lot of Bulworth does seem like Beatty heard, like, Fear of a Black Planet, and he was like, okay, I like what these young guys are saying. I get it.
Yeah. All right, next piece of trivia I have here is Warren Beatty held a private screening of this film for Professor Cornel West. Beatty was unsure if he wanted to release the film and asked West's opinion. West praised the film and told Beatty that it needed to be seen. Future President Cornel West, I mean, not really, he's not going to go anywhere. But hey, that's another 2023 connection we got going on here.
I think that's an important thing to note, and I'm sure we'll get to it later on. I got the impression watching this that a lot of people who struggle with satire probably don't like this movie.
No. And in fact, once we get to the Amazon reviews, I will not say the reviews because I think the reviews are really dumb, but a lot of people in the reviews who said this movie is really racist. And I don't know. I really don't see it that way. I mean, obviously, we're two white millennials talking about a movie that is primarily about a white guy experiencing black culture and literally appropriating it. But like the whole joke of this movie, and once again, spoilers before we get to the synopsis, is that Bulworth is a bad person. He is a corrupt, shitty, conservative Democrat who says things that conservative, shitty Democrats say behind black people's backs.
Because he is in the midst of a severe suicidal breakdown and he wants to sleep with this young woman.
Yes. That's the thing, is that like people who miss a satire, like you're not supposed to look up to Bulworth.
I mean, you kind of are.
Not right away, though.
Not right away. No. He is like, in some ways, Beatty's version of Billy Jack, where he's like, boy, if someone could just get up there and just let loose and just tell it like it is, which is, of course, the ultimate base lib fantasy.
100% it is. And boy, when we get to the synopsis, I will talk about that all motherfucking day. But speaking of unbased libs, unfortunately, the next trivia fact I have here is Aaron Sorkin and James Toback did a great deal of uncredited work on the script.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sorkin, I don't like him, of course. And the thing is, it's because his politics are shitty and he makes shitty centrist propaganda. But also, his shows mostly suck whenever I've seen them.
I tried watching that news show that he did, and that was
the
bad.
Newsroom. Yeah, I just don't think he makes entertaining television primarily. And in addition to making like propaganda, he makes shitty propaganda. So I have criticized films and other things on this show before for like maybe being pandering or being, spelling out what they're saying to the audience. And I was trying to reckon with that while watching this, that I was really enjoying this. And I was thinking, oh, is it because I'm hearing things that I like to hear said back to me? And I was thinking probably my other defense of that for Bulworth is that this is a fairly radical film for the level that it was made on and the type of person it was made by. I mean, it is still a liberal movie, but I almost feel like in 1998, we're still Clinton era. I still don't really think people were thinking that Bush was going to take 2000 or that any GOP were going to take in 2000, that to go ahead and say like, oh, Democrats are fucking up really bad. And the Democrats are ignoring black people. I think at the time that's still a pretty crazy thing to say, on such a wide stage. And you really do have to spell it out the way that like Bulworth does in this way. I think that's kind of the point, is like you do have to spoon feed it to people.
Because even now, like some people would, especially a lot of white liberals, would really sort of like scoff at that opinion. But back in the day, like nobody thought that. Like Democrats are the party of black people. And I think now we've pretty definitively seen that there's some flaws with that theory.
Yeah, I mean, a few. One being that it doesn't respect their voters as human beings, but also it doesn't help them.
Nope, it does not. And then speaking of Bush and 2000, so there was a sequel in development named Bulworth 2000, satirizing the 2000 presidential election, but unfortunately it was canceled. And it makes sense. This movie didn't even make its budget back.
I mean, yeah. Imagine the looks on their faces when Warren Beatty comes in and says he's doing Bulworth 2000.
And people were like, wait, what's Bulworth? Because everybody forgot about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is funny because, yeah, I mean, this movie was kind of a flash in the pan for a little bit. But yeah, I talk about reappraisal. Like, I feel like people talk about this movie now more than they did when it came out.
I mean, but it's literally within the last year and a half, I think.
That is very true, yes. Although, speaking of people who did talk about it well after it came out, this is my favorite fact I found on here. And this is one, Brian, that you found in your research. In 2013, the New York Times reported that Barack Obama had in private talked longingly of going Bulworth in reference to this movie.
Doesn't that make you sad for Obama? Doesn't that kind of make you like him a little bit more? Doesn't that make him seem a little bit more human?
I did, but I still have not forgiven Obama for just not acknowledging him and Larry's romance. I can't accept that.
He will. He'll come around, baby. Don't worry.
It's really funny that, of course, Larry Sinclair came back for a little bit, but like then a week later, that like news report about like Obama in the 80s talking about having gay sex, but in his mind.
He's going to show up at Sinclair's store and go, I'm just a man standing in front of a boy asking to suck his dick.
Yeah. He just goes up to his house and, Larry, I miss you. Let me be clear. I'm going to play this boombox. And he does the boombox thing from that movie.
But he's playing, like, I don't know, some extremely gay song, like, What Is Love song or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, man.
You Think You're a Man by Divine.
All right, enough about gay politicians. Let's get into an extremely straight politician. So, let's get into the synopsis of Bulworth here. So, the film begins with a title card stating, it is mid-March 1996, the time of the California primaries. Bob Dole has secured the Republican presidential nomination. President Clinton runs unopposed by other Democrats. The populace is unaroused. And it so is with little fanfare or attention that incumbent Democratic Senator J. Billington Bulworth prepares to embark upon the final weekend of his primary campaign to return to the Senate for yet another term. Now, I think it's really funny. If you just change the names, that's literally what we're dealing with in 2023 right now. Like, literally. That's literally what we're dealing with right fucking now. Oh, man, the more things change, the more things stay the same. They really do.
I mean, they just get worse. They just get a little more worse every year.
You know, I think it was, talk about Jays once again, Jay Bauman from Red Letter Media, another Milwaukee-based entertainment troupe, of course, who said something along the lines of when a movie or media property is seen as like, oh, it's aged so well. And he says, no, it hasn't. It's just that nothing's fucking changed.
That's good. I hadn't really thought of that.
So we're getting into the introduction of Mr. J. Bulworth, played by, once again, director and star and writer Warren Beatty. He is a Democratic U.S. Senator from California. He faces a primary challenger and is not doing very well in the polls. He's neck and neck, but losing a little bit. Once politically liberal, Bulworth has over time conceded to more conservative politics and to accepting donations from large corporations. And I also loved after the title card and we see the credits and he's like watching his like ad spots that talk about like getting rid of affirmative action and like getting rid of like welfare and stuff, which once again, hyper relevant in 2023 because of course we just fucking got rid of fucking affirmative action. But also I think it's interesting because you just see like pictures of like black liberals and black radicals and stuff like that. You have MLK Jr. and Malcolm X and Thurgood Marshall. And then like there's a Photoshop picture of like him and like I think Huey Newton or Angela Davis or something. And it's just like, you just see him like crying over watching this because he realizes he's just become a shell of himself.
Yeah.
It's actually like genuinely like, oh my God, is this going to be the whole tone of this movie?
Yeah, it's rough. So just to kind of circle back to the thing about Obama saying he wished he could go Bulworth. I mean, telling, right? Very telling of Obama that he was a fan of this movie.
You know, that's the thing, like, in his office, he's just watching, like, campaign ads of, like, oh, let me be clear, gay marriage will never happen. Never, ever gonna happen. And then, like, there's pictures
if you like your doctor, you can keep him.
Yeah. And there's pictures of, like, Bill Ayers and that fucking, that priest that he threw under the bus.
Priest that he threw under the fucking bus.
He's just like, oh, I'm sorry, Bill Ayers. Let me be clear. I still love you.
He's definitely had that moment.
Oh, for sure he's had that moment. Jesus. But yes, so Bulworth and his wife Connie, played by the actress Christine Baranski, have been having affairs with each other's knowledge for years, which J. Billington Bulworth is obviously not the radical part because Bill Clinton was never radical. But Connie and Jay are definitely Bill and Hillary Clinton for goddamn sure. And to be fair, obviously Monica Lewinsky had broken at this point. But good on Beatty for being able to just fucking like just see through that immediately.
I mean, okay, so especially at the time, I mean, I was a little kid, but I still feel like, I mean, I grew up, you know, my mom was like a Dem and whatever. I mean, Democrats circled the wagon pretty hard for Clinton through that whole thing.
They really fucking did.
He made it out, given that of all the things that he did that were wrong, that was the most bullshit thing to get him on. But he came out pretty much unscathed. So for Warren Beatty to put this in his fucking movie, maybe not the height of the Lewinsky controversy, but certainly fresh.
Jay Bulworth is tired of politics and unhappy with life. He makes plans to kill himself by proxy, essentially. He orders an assassination on himself, which is really fucking funny.
So he can take out a $10 million life insurance plan for his daughter.
Exactly. And he knows that a suicide would void the policy. He contracts to have himself assassinated within 2 days, once again, as we just reiterated. And I think it's also interesting, too, because there's talk about a Bill 2270. He talks with, like, insurance executives, where he's like, you know what? That's the thing. I like working black people. You know, I love Clarence Thomas and whatever the fuck. Oh, and he says Michael Jordan, too. That was another one.
Yeah, he does.
And he says, like, but I don't want to have to sell insurance to people that will just burn down their houses. That guy, who was he? Paul Sorvino. That was the guy who played that character. Yeah. I can't remember his name at the moment. But he has, like, a very stereotypical, like, foghorn leghorn Southern accent. And it's like, oh, we know exactly what this kind of guy is.
This movie does a great job. All of its characters are very comically broad, but it absolutely works. It's my favorite kind of satire.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. So after, of course, he puts the hit on himself, he arrives extremely drunk at the Los Angeles airport. And I love the scene, too, because, like, he just hears noises and whatever and just keeps running because he thinks the assassination's about to happen. And you know what I really love about this movie, too, is, like, the cinematography throughout the vast majority of it, because to the audience at home who've not seen this movie, he's extremely sleep deprived. He's alcoholic. He's not eating. He's basically in, like, a fucking fugue state.
At the start of the movie, he is, I believe, ending his third day without food or sleep.
Yes, exactly. And the movie is shot like a fucking like fever dream. Just things keep happening and some of it doesn't make sense. Some of it obviously does make sense. A lot of it just sort of is hushed and moved around just so fast that like there's like a million fucking moments in this movie that you have to watch again because you just like miss it on first glance. But yeah, Warren Beatty absolutely did a really good job of making this movie into almost like a psychedelic, almost like paranoiac kind of film. But at his first campaign stop, he goes to a black church where he freely speaks his mind in the presence of the C-SPAN film crew that are following his campaign. And the actors there, the female C-SPAN reporter is Laurie Metcalf. The male is played by Wendell Pierce. And also on the camera, very young Sean Astin. So it's kind of interesting seeing Sean Astin on there. But, you know, even the like tertiary characters of this movie are really stacked. You know, Laurie Metcalf, she was on fucking Roseanne. Sean Astin, of course, and this obviously was years before, but of course he plays Samwise Gamgee in Lord of the Rings movies. So cool shit. And also his probably most famous role is he was in the Ascension Millennium music video by Corey Feldman.
Friend of the pod.
Friend of the pod, Corey Feldman. Actually, we shouldn't say that. He's probably going to get canceled really soon.
But not Warren Beatty.
Yes, very much so. And also, this first campaign stop is really funny because he just goes up there and he's just like, yeah, we're at the doorstep of a new... Which that's his like catchphrase for this campaign.
Says it in every ad spot, every speech he gives, yeah.
He's like, yeah, okay, any questions? It's like, why didn't you come out in support of Senate Bill 2270, which was the insurance voice? Like, well, frankly, you didn't donate to my campaign. And it's like, everyone looks all shocked or whatever, which to be fair, I mean, he's telling the truth. I mean, this is how the fucking sausage is made in politics.
That's what everyone says they want from candidates.
Yeah, 100%. And then, like, you know, there's some pretty racist comments that Bulworth makes that I'm not going to repeat on this show, obviously. But the racist comments that he makes about, like, you know, accountability and respectability politics shit, that's literally what centrist shitty Democrats think.
Yeah, we won't say the worst parts of it, but one of the things is you need to get behind someone other than a linebacker who stabs his wife. I mean, like, get very realistic to, like, party Democrat thinking. Probably now still.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, if you get Obama behind closed doors, he will say this exact same shit. And in fact, you know, that was the thing is that I think it was relatively early on in his presidency where he was at like some speech and he was like talking about the importance of like black fathers and everything. And it's like, dude, you didn't grow up with a black father. You were raised by a white single mother and you became the president of the United fucking States.
Yeah.
I mean, come the fuck on, dude. Like, if anybody should fucking talk about respectability politics when it comes to fucking two-parent households, Barack Obama's the last motherfucker that should talk about that. Yeah, no shit.
So he should be, like, living proof that that's a fucking racist myth.
Yeah, Jesus Christ. But at the next campaign stop, he meets with Hollywood executives, and this is just the description I'm going to put in here. He does anti-Semitism, and he brings up Louis Farrakhan, which is really funny.
Well, because what does he say? He says to these executives, I'm sure you put something bad about Farrakhan in there. So it's like, implicitly, Bulworth kind of thinks that Farrakhan is like getting a raw deal from the establishment.
Well, I mean, to be fair, Bulworth was a radical back in the day.
And also, this is just a few years after. You have to remember, in the early 90s, Farrakhan, for a few years, he shifted from being this really contentious kind of niche figure to being an almost a mainstream civil rights figure. Like, he did start to pivot towards that in the 90s, and then he lost it.
Yeah, didn't he do the Million Man March?
Yeah.
Although that is a misnomer because it was only actually about 30,000. Oh, no, I'm not going to do that. Well, actually. Oh, Jesus. And then eventually he gets out of that campaign event and he goes to an all-night underground club. And I think it's really funny. He just goes there with Nina, who we failed to mention Nina, but she is the love interest of this movie. She's played by Halle Berry, of course. And she looks really good in this movie. Honestly, hilariously enough, she looks like one of my exes. No bullshit. But
yeah, she looks okay. She's fine, I guess.
Yeah, no, she's cool. That. You know, late 90s Halle Berry, just,
you know,
unremarkable.
Right.
Yeah.
Kind of mid.
Yeah. Jesus. But I think it's really funny because she and her like friends bring Bulworth and his campaign staff to this underground club. And then like he smokes one joint and then he just starts rapping. It's really funny. And his rapping in this movie is hilariously bad. I love it.
Also, there's no moment where he discovers rap music and like hears it and goes, "Oh, this amazing music from the young people." It's just like he just sort of absorbs it through osmosis and it comes out of him while he's like having a psychotic break.
It fucking rocks. Oh my God. Yeah, I really love this club scene. There's some really funny moments in here. So like he just smokes weed. You were mentioning like fucking osmosis. He learns rap skills.
Yeah, there's no musical moment for him. He just is rapping because he's like around black people. So he's just speaking in rhyme.
And also, we didn't mention earlier, but he is chauffeured around by his campaign managers, of course, and his campaign staff. His most prominent ones being played by the actors Oliver Platt and the actor Joshua Malina. Now, the Oliver Platt guy, he's the guy with like the short black hair who's just like an anxiety case all the time. And then I also love the scene, and it's like a blink and you miss it. I actually think I missed it maybe my first time watching it, because later in the movie he does cocaine, and it's like, why the fuck is he doing cocaine? But of course he's in DC. They all do fucking cocaine.
Yeah, no, he's a big cokehead.
But I love how he's just looking at the plate, and he sees a guy snorting lines, and then like 2 seconds later when that guy walks away, he's just like putting the cocaine in like his gums and stuff.
Yeah, just rubbing it into his gums.
I don't think it's really funny that the people that run this club, it's a woman and an older man. And the woman's like, "Oh, hey, how are you doing? You're fucking Clint Eastwood." And then he looks all shocked. And then the guy's like, "No, you're George Hamilton." You know what's really funny is I actually didn't know this until I listened to the Chapo review on this just before we recorded. But apparently there is an actual cameo from George Hamilton later in the movie that I missed.
Oh, that's awesome.
That was actually pretty cool. And also, we get to meet LD at this point, played by the actor Don Cheadle, which, once again, we got to mention, everybody in this movie is stacked.
Look at the cast list of this film. It is incredible. I mean, in some ways, it's not so crazy this movie didn't make its money back. But in other ways, you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I mean, early Don Cheadle, and Don Cheadle's fucking great in this movie. He's so good.
Yeah.
And he plays a gangster.
He's got his fingers in a lot of pies.
Exactly. And also, Nina's brother, played by the actor Isaiah Washington, who would later have his own controversy when he was on Grey's Anatomy.
Friend of the pod, Isaiah Washington.
We really love his opinions on gay people.
He got set up. He said they were taken out of context. Isaiah, come on the pod.
Yes, 100%. Tell us about your days working on Bulworth.
He wasn't saying anything that any true leftist doesn't know in their heart is true. And if you're a Democrat listening to this, you can quote me on that. Isaiah Washington had the leftist opinion on queer people.
Yes, up until Biden was the one who really changed leftist minds on gay people by supporting gay marriage like 2 months before Obama did. That's not here nor there. But yeah, so a lot of funny scenes and a lot of very interesting character introductions. And interestingly enough, actually, I didn't realize this until I was looking at the cast list earlier as well. The main bouncer guy, I think he was the one who is the one harassing everybody coming in and like checking up for weapons and stuff.
Yeah.
You know who that was?
Who?
That was Michael Clark Duncan.
Ooh, I can't believe I missed that.
God, just like I said, so many motherfucking people in this movie. It's crazy. I can tell you what, future talent. Fucking Warren Beatty definitely had a good eye for that shit. Because this movie came out a year before Green Mile.
Yeah. My big takeaway with this scene when we're in the club. So this is when, depending on how you want to look at it, Bulworth is either spiraling or he's beginning his ascent. Because this is like a paranoid film. It's shot and edited in a way to feel paranoid. Characters are literally paranoid all the time. And here you're seeing all of these characters being thrown into this environment together, and you're seeing them all respond to the stress of it.
No, exactly. It's a very tense film, I'll say that. It's a movie that's extremely funny, but it's a movie that really keeps you on your seat pretty much the entire time.
Especially because you're always worried that Warren Beatty's going to say something that you, as a white person, will have a hard time defending.
Well, to be fair, in the club scene, he drops the N-word.
I want to be clear to the listeners. The joke is that the character Bulworth doesn't understand why he can't say it, I think, right? He thinks he's being really in on the thing with them, right?
Well, and that's the thing, though, too, is that he keeps hearing, like, late 90s black vernacular. And he's like, what does this mean? What is this? What? Even though it's very clear he knows about black people throughout his history.
Well, who probably is a good real life analog to this is Joe Biden, who clearly worked a lot with black people at phases in his career, had black friends, or at least, a lot of black allies in politics. But, you could see doing something like this, right?
Yeah, let's just say that Mr. President Brandon has probably done these various things throughout his life. I'll just say that. He's almost certainly asked what a nappy dugout is. I guarantee you. He has asked what that means.
Bulworth's exchange with Isaiah Washington might even be what it was like between Joe and cornpop.
By the way, rest in peace, cornpop, friend of the pod, cornpop, because he died like a decade ago. But yes, after that scene, he goes to a next campaign stop, which is a fundraiser by the insurance lobby. And this is where he really starts rapping. And I'm not going to play the full rap, but it is very much like a very early rap song. It's like a Sugar Hill Gang song about politics.
It is important for you, the listener, to hear Warren Beatty rapping. And it is like, if you remember that joke throughout the 90s and it lived far too long of like, oh, it's an old person rapping. It's that, but it's like taken to the extreme degree. It's that really staccato rap thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I'm going to probably put the clip right here.
It's up to you. What'll we do? What'll we do? Well, it's up to you. You know, it ain't that funny. You contribute all my money. You make your contribution, then you get your solution. As long as you can pay, I'm gonna do it all your way. Yes, the money talks and the people walk. Yeah. Now let me hear you say it. Big money.
Oh, big money. Big money.
Big money. Big money. Big money. Big money. Big money. Big money. One man, one vote. Now, is that really real? The name of our game is Let's Make a Deal. Now, people got their problems, the haves and the have-nots, but the ones that make me listen pay for 30-second spots.
30 seconds.
Yeah.
30 seconds.
Yo, Bank of America, this table over here, Wells Fargo and Citibank, you're really very dear. Loan billions to Mexico and never have to fear, because taxpayers, take it in the rear.
Take it in the rear. Take it in the rear. Take it in the rear. Take it in the rear.
Yo, over here, we got our friends from oil. They don't give a shit how much wilderness is spoiled. They tell us that they're careful. We know that it's a lie. As long as we keep driving cars that let the planet die.
Let the planet die. Let the planet die.
Exxon, Mobil, the Saudis in Kuwait. If we still got the Middle East, the atmosphere can wait. The Arabs got the oil, we buy everything they sell. But if the brothers raise the price, we blow them all to hell. Now let me hear you say it. Saddam. Hussein. Saddam. Hussein.
I want you to give me a phone number. Dr. Morris Fishman, UCLA. He's at the Department of Psychiatry. Go, get the number now. Get it now.
Yo,
go.
Everybody gonna get sick someday, but nobody know how they gonna pay. Healthcare, managed care, HMOs ain't gonna work, no sir, not those. Cause the thing that's the same in every one of these motherfuckers there, the insurance companies.
Insurance.
Yo, you can call it single payer or Canadian way. Only socialized medicine will ever save the day. Come on now, let me hear that dirty word. Socialism!
But yeah, definitely you really want to just hear Warren Beatty's rapping for yourself, because honestly, he's fucking hot on the mic. I'll tell you that. I mean, some of them are really funny. I also love the one where, he talks about socialized medicine will save the day, and then he says, say that dirty word, socialism, and he just screams it. It's so funny. And then also the line before that a lot of people forget is him being like, yeah, I hate violence against women, but when I want to get pussy, I'll still get it, or something like that. That's where he says the nappy dugout line, which is really funny.
Well, and one of the things too with the obvious joke is, late middle-aged senator starts rapping, is that it's not like anyone in this universe thinks he's a good rapper. In fact, one of the things that they do throughout is that when Bulworth is rapping, he stutters a lot and he repeats words a lot because he has to stop and think about what he's going to say. It does take pains to be like, oh, the point isn't that he's a good rapper, it's that he's going insane and people are responding to it.
Exactly. And also there's another later scene where this 4-year-old black kid's just like, is that how white people rap? It makes me laugh every time that happens. But all throughout all this, he's being pursued by the paparazzi, his insurance company, his campaign managers, and an increasingly adoring public, because he just keeps wowing people by just telling the fucking truth.
Telling it like it is.
Telling it like it is by by talking to all the big Hollywood Jews. No, because he does literally say that in the movie. I'm quoting Bulworth directly. But that's the thing, though, right? Is that this was also another, like, talk about dated thing. This was another late 90s trope. Is that, like, what? I'm not bigoted. I'm talking shit about everybody. That's like the South Park mantra.
This movie is a little bit more self-aware about it, whereas I feel like when Matt and Trey, we've talked about them enough on this show, I know, but they are doing it, I think, for the sake of doing it. Beta, at least, even though he's definitely, like, an old, edgy liberal who definitely is like, oh, I gotta make jokes about everyone. He at least has, like, a premise that he's working towards with his joke.
Oh, yes, very much so. Like, I think that Warren Beatty does this kind of stuff to uplift to a certain extent, and obviously South Park do it just to punch down.
Yeah, just for the sake of doing it, because it's easy.
Exactly, 100%. And then also I failed to mention earlier, because he's not really a major character, but he is the sort of Greek chorus for Bulworth in this movie. There is a character who's credited as Rastaman, played by Amiri Baraka, who was actually the poet laureate of the state of New Jersey at one point. He fell under hot water because he made a poem at one point, and I don't know when it came up, but he made a poem about it, about the dancing Israeli conspiracy theory about 9/11. So, yeah, he was quickly sort of ushered off the stage at that point. But yeah, like Amiri Baraka was like apparently a very well-renowned poet.
Between that and the subtly pro-Farrakhan line earlier in this film, maybe we should be considering that maybe Warbede is, NOI.
I think he is. But yes, his character's name is Rastaman, who tells Bulworth oftentimes to not be a ghost, but a spirit. And he's basically just following Bulworth around through various times in the movie. And Bulworth's like, who the fuck is this guy? And it is very much like a Greek chorus style character in this movie.
Okay. I don't really think this matters in the narrative of the film or whether it works or not. I don't think this character exists. I don't think anyone else sees him. I think that this is part of Bulworth's break that he's going through.
I will agree with that. You're right. Nobody else acknowledges him. He's just a fucking raving homeless man that he is the only one
Why would he be all these places? This isn't a Shyamalan twist, by the way. This does not have any bearing on like how the narrative plays out, so audiences don't worry about this, right? This is a figment of Bulworth's imagination, this old guy.
Yes, no, 100%. And then Bulworth attempts to go to another campaign stop, but he escapes. And Bulworth and Nina drive to one of his campaign staff, Davers. I can't remember his first name, but he's played by the actor Jack Warden, who this was actually one of his last roles before he passed away. Probably most famous for being juror number 7 in 12 Angry Men. And he's very good in this movie. I think he adds a very good sort of like scummy Washington, D.C. character here, because he's Bulworth's fixer. That's what he is. Because he's the guy that helped set up the assassination plot in the first place, because he knows a guy who knows a guy.
And it's actually a pretty subtle little joke in there. Remember, they have a guy that they go to for assassinations. So the implication is that senators are getting people assassinated all the time. It's not like a big deal for Bulworth to get someone assassinated. The crime boss isn't surprised that he's talking about an assassination. He's surprised when the target is Bulworth himself.
Yeah,
so we can presume that Bulworth has probably had people killed. And
also, like, he talks about the quote-unquote research project, and he doesn't even, like, hesitate. It's like, yep, research project. This is something that Bulworth has seemingly done before, which is why, once again, Bulworth is not somebody to look up to throughout, like, 99% of this movie. So people are like, oh, he's racist. It's like, yeah, because he's a bad person who is responsible for people dying.
Yeah, because Bulworth isn't doing this because he's, like, pure. He's doing this because he's having a breakdown because he can't deal with his own guilt and unhappiness. It's not like a noble thing. It's like a psychotic break.
100%. And then also, while Nina and Bulworth are sitting in the car, he talks to Nina about, like, I used to know Huey Newton back in the day. And he's like, do you know who Huey Newton is? Like, I don't know. Like, black people your age don't know who Huey Newton is. And he goes, whatever happened to all the black leaders? And then Nina goes into this, like, Twitter thread about her thoughts on, like, deindustrialization and, like, where black leaders went to and stuff like that. And to be fair, I mean, she's pretty on the money.
Yeah, there is one thing about this scene I don't like, which is that the way Nina's response goes, she says, well, some people think it's because all of the great black leaders were shot. And then she goes into this thing about deindustrialization and, like, economic things. And I would say that the way it's phrased kind of says that you have to pick one of those two things. And I feel like it maybe kind of downplays the effect that having all of those leaders murdered had on the movement a little bit.
Yeah, all the surviving people decided not to go that direction because they didn't want to die.
Yeah.
That's why they all went to the New Democrat deal in the 90s.
Well, where else were they going to go? That's the thing that Bulworth says when he's at the church. He says, what are you going to do? Vote for a Republican? No, you're not.
Oh, geez. But at Daber's house, he tries to attempt to call off the assassination, but before the deal can be completed, the person coordinating the hit has a heart attack and ends up in a coma at the hospital. So just a comedy of errors here.
This is like classic comedy of errors.
And then there is a televised debate. So also at this point, his main campaign manager, the guy played by Oliver Platt, is basically like during his own like exhaustion, cocaine fueled rampage, just like, oh no, I'm totally getting what he's doing. All right, we got to get him in front of the fucking TV. We got to like fucking do this. And like this guy, he's a fucking great actor in this movie. He does such a fucking good job of playing this exact type of DC fucking psycho.
Yeah, all these fucking Beltway insider fucking psychos. And that's the whole thing is he's getting infuriated by Bulworth fucking up the game plan. You know, like he's like, well, I'm going by the book. We're doing all of this. We're trying to win this campaign. But he's this big fucking geeked out cokehead who's just rampaging and blitzed the whole time.
But yeah, he eventually gets Bulworth onto the debate stage with his primary opponent, which we actually don't really get any of him in the movie. And the description that I had actually detailed some of them a little bit, but that's not really in the movie. So I decided not to really include him other than acknowledging the fact that he has a primary opponent. But after this debate, he derides insurance companies and the American healthcare system while drinking from a flask. Which I also love this one, too, because it's actually prophetic. Is the exact same points that Bernie Sanders did when he talked about Medicare for all. Whereas, like, private health care takes 28 cents per dollar just on administrative costs, while only 3% is done through Medicare, which is actually still true. In fact, the private one's actually gotten worse. I think something like 35 to 40% of all healthcare costs through private healthcare are done just through administration. They're not actually even done through care. And not only since Obamacare, but since this movie came out, like the amount of healthcare administrators has gone up like thousands of percent since this movie came out. It's rough. And Bulworth, fucking Warren Beatty, he called it 25 motherfucking years ago. But after this debate, he retreats to the home of Nina's family in an impoverished South Central Los Angeles neighborhood. After a lovely dinner with Nina's family, and also I put this in my note, where he's like, oh, these are great collard greens. Like, oh no, that's kale. And I thought that was really funny because, of course, Bulworth's just being racist, basically. He's like, oh, yeah. What do you people eat?
Thinks it's collard greens. Yeah.
Yeah, collard greens, that's it.
Yeah, he likes kale. He thinks it's collard greens.
Yeah. But he just looks like shit because, of course, he's been awake for like a week straight. He just disheveled as fuck. And they're like, oh, well, you know, let's get your outfit to the cleaners. He's like, oh, Marcus Garvey, because one of the characters in this house is just named Marcus Garvey. He's like, oh, get him an outfit. And then the only way I can describe it, and I remember describing this in the original Dick Proles episode, and I described it as a character bit that I had on the podcast, the Honky Tep outfit. Which the bit on the show is like a white person who just literally believes in Hotep conspiracy theories, but for white people. And he looks like a guy who would be a honky tep in real life. I think on Chapo, they described him as like, he looks like Cartman or like a South Park character.
Oh, he does.
Because Warren Beatty, to the audience at home, just look up Warren Beatty, Bulworth, and just look at the outfit that he's wearing. He's wearing a beanie and like sunglasses, 90s dad shoes, and like blue basketball shorts. It's really funny.
Looks so warm, man.
It is genuinely one of the best movie outfits of all time. This movie should have won an Academy Award just for like costume design, just for that outfit.
Iconic, for sure.
It's so good. And he goes throughout pretty much the rest of the movie dressed like this too.
That's the end of his metamorphosis.
While walking down the street looking for Nina, he witnesses a group of children selling crack and intervenes to rescue them from an encounter with a racist police officer. And one of the cops, I swear to God, I thought it was Robert Patrick. It's not Robert Patrick, but he looks like fucking Robert Patrick.
Yeah, I remember seeing that guy and be like, who the fuck is that?
It's not Robert Patrick. I could have sworn it was him, but I looked it up on IMDb. It's not. But, I mean, to be fair, he did play an LAPD officer in fucking T2.
Yeah, as soon as I saw that fucking cop, I was like, I swear I've seen that guy, but I just couldn't place him.
I tried looking him up, and I really couldn't find anything either.
So we're just going crazy.
Just like Bulworth. But he later finds that they are working for LD, and Bulworth makes his way to LD's place, and he's like, where's Nina? And then, like, LD goes on his own fucking rant about what he's doing for the quote-unquote community. And it's sort of the same basic gangster talk about, like, you know, I'm giving these kids an opportunity to be involved in this fucking market or whatever. And it's like, no, you're just literally exploiting grade schoolers and, like, getting them murdered. Which, I mean, talk about, like, 90s conservative Democrat thing. Like, that was the whole super predator thing.
Well, the whole point, I guess, of the scene is that, like, what he's saying is like true, right? That there's no other opportunities for these kids. There's no education. There's no job opportunities. Like that is fundamentally true, but that it's not a defense for that, I guess, is what Bulworth takes away from that, right? Because he incorporates things that Frankie says later on.
Yes, exactly.
This is a scene where if there was an argument, you had mentioned to me that some people think this movie has a paternalistic attitude. I mostly don't agree with that, but I kind of can see that in this scene.
Yeah, I can see that too.
I don't know to what degree. Like, we're a couple of white guys. I don't really have any experience to speak on here. They at least give the guy who is like the gangbanger like some dimension and allow him to say his reasoning, and they are like authentic reasons for like unrest in cities and things. This is the only scene, and it's actually a very good scene. Like Don Cheadle's great in it. It's funny, it's well written, but again, the movie itself doesn't take a paternalistic attitude. You could maybe argue that the character Bulworth does, and I'd agree with that, but I could see why people would think that, especially based on this scene.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see that too. But I would say that to the people that do believe that, I would try recommending they pay a little bit more attention throughout the movie, because like, I don't necessarily think that, as I've mentioned many times before, obviously Bulworth is a bad person, and the people are literally lecturing to him like, no, the reason that the world is fucked up is because of people like you. So like, I don't think that's necessarily paternalistic. If it was paternalistic, he would be like unironically Bill Clinton and tell these people to pull their pants up.
That's sort of why I would say I think that the character Bulworth probably does have like that sort of impulse in him, but the movie does not.
Would agree with that 100%. But yeah, there is another television appearance that Bulworth comes on, and this is the one where he's just completely honky-tepped up. He's just out of his mind. He's just literally like just manic rambling at this point about, to be fair, various things that are true. A lot of them are very true. He also raps and repeats verbatim statements that Nina and LD have told him about the lives of poor Black people and their opinions of various American institutions such as education and employment. And he eventually offers a solution. Everybody should just fuck each other until everybody's the same color. That one's really fucking funny.
Just gotta keep fucking.
Which, to be fair, though, that was like a totally 90s colorblind solution to racism.
That's true. What I was thinking about that made me like that scene a lot was that that's literally a white supremacist, neo-Nazi, like, fear-mongering thing, is that that's what the left wants. And so to have Bulworth come in there and say, oh yeah, we just gotta fuck all the races away until we're all, the same color.
Well, that's the thing, Brian. I agree with that. That's why I started bleached.com. Oh, no, I think that was a Felix joke. It was whited.com or something like that. Yeah. Because Jordan Peterson was talking about, like, the black serpent or something. He's like, that's why I started my new website, whited.com. Oh, man. But after that interview goes off the air, Bulworth spends the film fearful of a man who had been following him under the assumption that he was the assassin trying to murder him. After the man finally pushes Bulworth to complete terror, he corners Bulworth on the television studio set and begins photographing Bulworth with Nina, revealing himself to simply be a paparazzi. Now, you do see this guy throughout a lot of the movie. I think we first see him at the club, if I'm not mistaken. No, I think it's at the airport.
No, we see him before that. Yeah,
we
see him very early on.
So you are correct. But yeah, throughout the movie, and he does look like a fucking like Italian mob hit guy. But yeah, you see him at the club, you see him at the airport, you see him at various campaign stops, but all he's trying to do is just get a fucking scoop. And, Nina, of course, is following Bulworth, and he catches them in a scoop of Bulworth cheating on his wife, I guess, essentially.
Just before I forget it. So when we see pre-breakdown Bulworth's ad spots, one of the things that he keeps saying is that he believes in fidelity.
Yes. Oh my God. He believes in like traditional values, I think he says too at some point. Yeah, God. That's the politician thing. But to be fair, though, we talk shit about Democrats, right? But for the most part, when Democrats do sex scandals, they're at least with consenting adults. We can't say that with Republicans. The pedocon theory is absolutely real.
The whole right thing and the obsession with groomers and things, it's because they all are like fucking teenagers. Because they have to make a more fantastical, extreme version of it. And then go, that's not what I'm doing.
I mean, the one Democrat pedophile I can think of that made news was actually a Milwaukee County judge, unfortunately, but that did happen. But otherwise than that, it's all Republicans. I mean, talk about fucking Dennis Hastert all day. He was the third most powerful man in the country. We don't like it.
Not good. Not a friend of the pod, unless he wants to come on.
I mean, if he wants to come on and give us money and... Nah, let's not do that. I'm going to disagree with having Dennis Hastert on the Millennials or podcast.
We'll talk about this off mic.
Yeah.
I think you're being a little bit hasty.
But after the scene, Bulworth and Nina flee to Nina's house once again, and she finally reveals that she is the assassin that was indirectly hired to kill Bulworth. And she pulls out her gun, and she decides not to, because even though a lot of people in the Amazon reviews were kind of mad that Halle Berry's character and Warren Beatty's character became a thing at the very end of the movie. But like, once again, we have to say this to the audience. It's alluded to quite heavily that she is the assassin throughout most of her screen time. But the thing is that like people are like, well, they made her the love interest. It's like, well, first off, in the actual movie, 90% of it, she just literally wants to kill this guy. Like, it's not like she's from the very beginning like, oh, this guy's hot, I'm gonna fuck this guy. No, it's like at the very end, it becomes a movie, sure. But like 90% of it, she's just doing a job. So trying to say that it's like, oh, it's just gross old guy trying to fuck a hot
But also,
woman,
she's in her 30s.
Yeah, I think I mentioned in the chat earlier, she was 32 when this movie came out, and Warren Beatty was 60. I'm sorry, like, I know Zoomers are always like, you know, that 75-year-old man groomed that 42-year-old woman. Like, I'm sorry, if you are above the age of, like, 18, legally you can't be groomed.
Yeah.
And also, like, when you're 32, the only thing you can't do is, ironically enough, become president. You could do literally everything else legally. You can't be groomed at 32. That's not a thing that happens.
There are ways that people get groomed. People get groomed into abusive relationships. People get groomed into abuse. Whatever. I mean, I don't know. Zoomers are such puritanical freaks about this shit. It's insane. But it really bodes bad for the culture, for art, and for progressivism in general, I think.
It really does. And like, yeah, if a 32-year-old woman got into a relationship with a 60-year-old man, just apropos of nothing, and your first thought is he groomed her, there's something wrong with you.
You're insulting that woman. You're insulting that 32-year-old adult who made their own decision.
Infantilizing a grown-ass woman. Like, come on.
Yeah.
But yeah, she eventually decides not to carry out the job, and she kind of falls in love with him, whatever, but at that point, like, his whole world is basically falling apart. He just collapses in bed. He sleeps for 36 hours, during which the media speculates over his sudden absence leading up to the election day. Bulworth wins the primary in a landslide. And I also love, you see Bulworth wins in a landslide, and you get to a cutaway scene where his wife is having sex with another man, too. Which, to be fair, once again, Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton analog, they've been fucking other people for 40 fucking years.
Oh, yeah, for as long as they've been fucking married. Probably longer.
It wasn't necessarily a swinging thing. It was just more of like, well, I hate you, but you give me what I want.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, man. Bulworth accepts a new campaign for the presidency during his victory speech, but is suddenly shot by Graham Crockett. Well, not necessarily Graham Crockett, probably, because you see him, like, above the wall of the house that they're at, where all the media is. Bulworth gets shot in the back, and they do it kind of like as an homage to MLK Jr. when he gets assassinated, because, like, a bunch of people come up, it's like, where was the gun? And they point at the wall or whatever. Like, it's very reminiscent of that very famous photo. But we believe, anyways, that's Graham Crockett, an agent of the insurance company that was fearful of Bulworth's recent push for single-payer healthcare. And, of course, he does not get caught, or at least it's insinuated he doesn't get caught. And at the very end of the movie, there is a final scene just before the credits where Bulworth's fate is left ambiguous. The final scene shows Rastaman standing alone outside of Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles. He exhorts Bulworth, who's presumably inside, to not be a ghost, but a spirit, which, as, of course, he had mentioned earlier, can only happen if you have a quote-unquote song. And then in the final shot of the film, he asks the same of the audience, essentially. So, like, there is, like, a message at the very end of this movie to a certain extent.
Start rapping.
Yes, and start rapping, exactly. But I think when he says not to be a ghost, but a spirit, so, like, there is a difference. Like, a ghost is, like, a stationary thing. It doesn't move. It's a, like, never-ending presence of a thing that happened that can never move on, whereas a spirit is, like, a guiding light.
Yeah, a ghost is what Bulworth is at the beginning of this movie, when he has drifted away from his liberal or progressive, maybe even leftist politics of his youth, and into this kind of neoconservative on a Democrat ticket who's crying in his office. At that moment, he's a ghost. He's a spirit when he goes through this transformation and is now speaking for people, and he's just letting other people's experiences and their truths flow out of it.
No, I totally agree. I think that's definitely the message that I think that Warren Beatty was trying to get through this movie.
And we think Bulworth probably dies, right? Person like that existed in real life, they'd be fucking dead.
Yeah, because I watched the movie again, and he shot with a sniper on the lower left chest, and that's where your heart is.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's
And
almost
just like
certainly dead.
just the movie going out on Bulworth getting shot and the don't be a ghost, be a spirit thing. To me, that just indicates that we're supposed to believe that, yeah, he's dying.
You know, as we mentioned earlier, just like with fucking the Raid 2 and Driver, like, he's just dead. That's why there was never a Bulworth 2000, because Bulworth's fucking dead.
My only other possible thought for this is that if Bulworth doesn't die, that he wakes up and he's like back to where he is at the beginning of the movie. This is a cynical ending, but that's what I think it would be if he wasn't dead. He'd wake up and he'd have gone through this moment of like clarity and like altruism and things, and he wakes up and he's kind of shaken and people are kind of pushing him back to this really moderate kind of position he's in at the beginning of the movie, and maybe he just sort of goes with it. So because those are the two options that I have, I'm choosing to believe that he dies because he's too positive of a figure.
Yes. And speaking of, that is Bulworth. So before we get to Amazon reviews, do you have any thoughts before we get into those?
I would highly recommend this movie. I think I've said probably more than enough times. I really love satire. I don't even mind if satire is heavy-handed as long as it's like engaging and it takes big swings. This movie is such a big swing. It's so ambitious. It's like ballsy. Like, I almost wonder, do you think Warren Beatty was even surprised that it didn't make very much money? Do you think he was just like, whatever? Because again, this is a passion project movie. The dialogue, especially, some of it's a little bit hammy to me. It's very of its time. It's like, oh, well, you know, you'd probably write that differently if you wrote it now. And I don't mean that it's offensive. I just mean like some of the ways they describe things are very literal. And that's like, oh, you might have tried to, if you wrote that a few years later, maybe you would try to say things a little bit more eloquently instead of just kind of reciting them. But other than that, I think it's great.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I've seen this movie at this point probably a half a dozen times, maybe even more. And there's things about this movie that I notice more and more every time. Like, it is a movie that you have to watch at least more than once, in my opinion. But no, yeah, I love this movie. I think it's a fucking great political satire. I think Warren Beatty was, a little bit too early on the train of realizing exactly, like, where the Democrats were going. I think he was pretty prophetic in sort of seeing where a lot of this shit goes. And hilariously enough, I think this movie's dated in a lot of ways, but it's also very relevant in a lot of ways, too.
Well, it's dated in a lot of aesthetic ways because it came out in 98 and it's actually pretty tied to the hip hop of the earlier 90s. The dialogue, especially the dialogue from the black characters, can be kind of stilted because that's how black characters were written often in movies by then. So it's not terrible. It's just the thing that sticks out. But the actual content of the movie, I don't know if I think it's really dated.
No, I totally agree with that. So I'm going to save my very final thoughts until after the Amazon reviews. So speaking of, I have two Amazon reviews here, one positive and one negative. Now, I will say the positive review is pretty long, but I think it surmises a lot of our opinions on this film quite well. And I'm glad that other people agree with us because, of course, we're always right.
Yeah, and the listeners know that. Well, one of them, our one guy who comments.
All right, but yeah, so Matthew Homer gives this movie 4 stars, and they say, scathingly funny political satire. And the body of the review says, this is very long, so sit tight. Once a prolific superstar, the still bankable Warren Beatty had made just 9 movies in the last decade. 3 of these have earned him 3 Oscar nominations and 1 win. In the 1970s and 1980s, he ranked among the top 10 playboys in America. His conquests were legendary. Some of his movies were steamy by the standards of their time. Now, over 60 years old, he seems more than happily married to Annette Bening. He has reached the point where he can make movies that interest him. Perhaps we should make that ones which amuse him. Okay, so there's just a typo in here. Okay. Bulworth may have been the most singularly eccentric big-budget movie of 1998. It's about a politician, but whereas primary colors stayed within a defined framework, Bulworth is all over the map. Yet, depending on your sense of humor, it may be the funniest political satire you will see for some time to come. Beatty is J. Billington Bulworth, a U.S. Senator from California who is up for yet another term. The time is 1996. As the movie notes, Clinton is running unopposed and Dole is definitely going to get the Republican nomination. The public is unaroused, which means that the political climate is completely status quo. Meanwhile, Bulworth is about to have one heck of a nervous breakdown. The reason Bulworth goes bananas is never specifically stated. That's actually not true. It's actually quite blatantly stated in my opinion, because he becomes a cynical fucking sellout.
Yeah, he hates himself.
But the implication is that the games, deceptions, and deceits that make up modern politics have finally undone him. Okay, so fair enough. They actually say it in the next sentence here. Because I was going to say, that's pretty blatantly fucking implied in the movie.
Yeah, it's not like a mystery.
Yeah, exactly. In deep despair, he gets $10 million worth of life insurance and promptly arranges for his own assassination. The next day, he changes his mind. He spends the rest of the movie, and by the way, they also put moving in here, so they spelled movie as moving, running both for office and for his life. He goes to fundraisers and insults his wealthy backers. He attends a church in Compton and tells his black audience that they're never going to get any help from Washington because lower income people are only exploited by the big businesses that pay to get politicians elected. He becomes outrageously incorrect politically. The media, of course, always looking for a hot story, embraces him. There's that hitman to be avoided. We see groups of reporters following Bulworth, who hasn't slept in days. A car backfires. I don't know why they even noted that in this review. Very bizarre.
So the reason that the car backfires is a gag because he's afraid that it's the assassin shooting at him. But I'm not sure why this reviewer is noting it in this way.
To be fair, all the what he thinks are cat and mouse games that are just like various noises are actually pretty funny.
Yeah.
But like just bringing it up in a review when it's not appropriate is very strange.
Like it's a plot point.
Yeah, exactly. Bulworth starts walking very fast and then breaks into a run. Once again, I don't know why this person keeps bringing up random points. Sometimes he makes a getaway by driving off in his big black limo. Such a vehicle looks ridiculous in a chase scene, to say the least. Well, that's the thing, though, is that Democrats and limos, we know about those specifically, and those stories are very sad. You know, once again, we got to talk about no justice for Larry Sinclair. Obama, just please come out and acknowledge the fact that you and Larry made love in a limo in Peoria. It's totally fine. No one cares anymore.
Look, I would respect you more. It would help me understand you more, Barack.
Honestly, if Barack Obama did just come out and be like, let me be clear, I'm actually really gay.
I'm gay as fuck.
The gay sex that I had with men, in my mind, was actually real. Like, if he said that, I'd be like, yeah, good for you. Congratulations. Yeah. Beneath this sometimes dark comedy, Bulworth has a lot of insightful and painful comments to May about our often hypocritical and ineffectual government. Once again, there's so many typos in this fucking review.
This guy needed to slow down.
Yeah, right? This is actually the highest rated review, too, which is why I included it. These observations are made satirically, but effectively. This is not heavy-handed work. Actually, this movie is kind of heavy-handed, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, it is, extremely.
One thing that hampered Bulworth at the box office was his portrayal of the man in the black community. People didn't get it. They were offended, especially many liberal white people. Beatty was in no way making fun of African Americans by showing a very streetwise group. His point, which I thought was fairly obvious, was that many people will behave in an antisocial way in a society that is largely indifferent and often hostile towards them. I think that's almost a no-brainer. Bulworth is that rare politician who has soul. I have never been fond of politics, perhaps because I grew up around a lot of good old boy politicians. I have always enjoyed movies about politics because they're almost invariably cynical. From 1939's classic Mr. Smith Goes to Washington to Bulworth, Hollywood has shown that the American people are wise to what really goes on. Why we do nothing about it is another question. So I agree with some of this review, but I'll be honest, there's a lot of this review I don't agree with.
I think I would say I agree with this person's overall opinion of the movie. They don't seem to think it's funny in the same way I do. And it's sort of hard for me to tell what they think of, like, the actual plot. I think that we both like it, though.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, giving a movie a 4 stars is generally pretty good. Although, to be fair with Amazon, it'll be like, oh yeah, this is the greatest movie I've ever seen. 1 star. Like, stuff like that does happen. But I would say for the most part, yeah, if somebody gives a movie 4 stars, they generally like it.
I mean, I don't know, so maybe I should take this person at their word. Do you think the reason this movie bombed was because of the portrayals of African Americans? I feel like that was probably not the main reason this bombed. When you look at other portrayals from the same time, from movies of the same kind of caliber or level.
I think part of the reason why this movie didn't do very well at the box office is, I mean, this is obviously a political satire film. Political satires in the 90s were not really like this. This is a very sort of niche kind of movie. Like, this is a movie that appeals to, like, base libs and, like, 2023 ironic internet leftists.
Yeah, who's the audience for this in 1998, really? Because you get the sense that what Warren Beatty wants is for people to see this and to be, like, kind of compelled to it. But that's not how people watch movies.
No, it really isn't.
You know what I mean? I get the sense that he wanted people to see this movie and feel kind of liberated to talk like Bulworth is, but nobody that isn't already there is probably going to like this movie.
Well, and that's the interesting thing, because we keep bringing up the comparison between Tom Laughlin and Warren Beatty, who are, of course, both noted based libs in Hollywood. But like, this movie was a financial failure because I think of its politics, whereas the Billy Jack movies were successes despite their politics.
Yes, yeah. Well, I think the aesthetics of the politics, like the vague politics of Billy Jack, played into its success, but the specifics of it, I think, made people deeply uncomfortable. And I think the politics of this movie made people in 1998, because again, who's the audience? It's not Democrats and it's not Republicans. And in 1998, in terms of practicality, what else is there?
Yeah, no, exactly. I think the only audience that were enticed to see this movie, because you're talking about seeing ads for it in like mainstream comic books that like children read. But like, also maybe if you heard the song Ghetto Superstar, maybe you're like, oh, I want to see the movie that this song is based on, I guess. Well, I don't know.
And that's the thing. Now, Warren Beatty, I assume that he's aiming really hard and for non-cynical reasons for a kind of like, a crossover audience, like black and white audience, which is pretty unusual at that time still, I would say. That's not how they casted films back then. It just isn't. But the politics of this, again, because they're so explicit, they're so in your face, they're literally spoken by the characters almost to the audience, what the politics of the film are, which again, I think is why I like this movie, because I think that's what you have to do with a movie like this. You have to really beat it over the audience's head. I do believe that, unfortunately. But I think, like, who wants to see this? Who goes in and says, let's see the funny comedy movie, and is expecting this and comes away satisfied?
Yeah, who in 1998 was like, oh, the new Warren Beatty comedy's out. And then, yeah, they get to the part where he's just like being anti-Semitic.
Think about a bunch of like Bill Clinton era Democrats going in and be like, this will be good. And because they're probably expecting him to, really punch hard at Republicans, which he definitely does, especially at the beginning. But then it pretty explicitly says Democrats don't care about black voters. Isn't it obvious? And at that point, you got to assume most of those people are off the train because they know he's talking about them.
Oh, 100%. I mean, it's, talk about how this movie was kind of prophetic. It's almost kind of like a fucking Get Out comparison to a certain extent, because before that, you didn't really see movies outside of Bulworth that really parodied white liberals' opinions on black people specifically. And this movie is like a pre-Get Out, but not a horror movie.
Yeah, and just in terms of how rare was that to see parodied in like mainstream films?
Yeah, in 1998, outside of Bulworth, I can't think of anything. That was not really a thing in 1998.
Just yesterday, actually, I bought a giant treasury of the first 2 years of the Boondocks, and it is crazy to me that came out when it did. Like, reading it now and thinking this was nationally syndicated in like 2000 and 2001, and then you read something and you're like, they put this in the newspaper. That's wild.
Oh man, that's like back in the Soviet Union when they'd have like a random like capitalist as like the paid stooge or whatever. I can't remember the exact terminology at the moment. Oh, controlled opposition. Like, did they think Aaron McGruber was going to be the controlled like black radical opposition, and then like his opinions became pretty mainstream like 10-15 years later? Well, at least among a strain of certain demographics.
I think, not to go on too much of a derail, I don't even think there was that much thought to it. I think probably that newspaper syndicates saw that there was no like black cartoon in the newspaper, and they saw the market to be filled with that. And then I think Magruder's savvy enough. You've read the Boondocks comic strip. It's pretty different from the animated series. It's very much like Peanuts, where it's just characters talking on screen, and it actually is pretty similar to Peanuts in the humor and things. So he was savvy enough to go like, okay, we're gonna do like some pretty explicitly black radical stuff, some pretty explicitly socialist stuff, and some like anti-W and even truther stuff. But then we're also gonna do cute stories about little kids being kids,
And I don't necessarily know all that much about the comics. I actually did have that exact book that you're talking about at one point. I don't know what happened to it, but I had that exact book at one point. And I also do want to mention, because this is something obviously you and I are both, and you are mostly the one who's really super into just all the fucked upness about it. But Brian, what was the very first Boondocks episode about?
The first one that was produced was about R. Kelly. It was the second one to air.
And finally, he's in prison, but that came out nearly 20 motherfucking years ago.
There's a long series of strips that went on for weeks and weeks And again, I just want to say, Aaron McGruder ahead of the curve on that, because everyone knew R. Kelly was guilty. And I'm going to say, like, he seems to have been one of the only people that wasn't like a weird conservative, that was, not like a black woman, because there were plenty of them, in the feminist movement and things. But he was one of the only people, especially one of the only people with his platform, saying, like, this is fucked up. This guy's a rapist.
Yes. Well, you know what? Aaron McGruder, you're on the right side of history. Very much so. In a lot of different things.
Even the iffy stuff about Magruder, I think he's coming from a good place, and he's basically right about a lot.
He's the black Warren Beatty. No.
Yeah, actually, well, that's what kind of got me out of this. Like, when I was watching this, I'm literally taking in a bunch of Aaron McGruder shit the last couple of weeks, and then I watched this, and I was like, oh, this fits right in with that.
It really does. Oh my God. All right. And then speaking of people that may disagree with us on our interpretation of this film's racial politics, I have a 1-star review from Megan, who I believe it's Megan from Family Guy, so we can just hate on her as much as we want. And the header of the review says, "What were they thinking?" And the body of the review says, What were they thinking? Yeah. Was that ABGN who does that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
Hell yeah, dude. Never mind. It's actually pretty obvious. Far from being the deft parody of modern civics that the producers initially intended, this is an extremely silly movie that trivializes major problems and frequently borders on being racist, classist, and anti-Semitic. One problem is that this was Warren Beatty's attempt at being hip and reaching out to a whole new generation. Well, I'm part of that generation, and let me tell you that it just came out as creepy and pathetic. Warren Beatty and Halle Berry, ew, on so many levels. Warren Beatty being accepted as some sort of brother? You've got to be kidding me.
That's the joke!
Which, by the way, this review was made in like 2003, so
it's a comedy movie.
So this is like an elderly millennial talking about this.
Look, there's things that you could critique about this movie if you did. That is literally the joke. We're not supposed to watch this and go like, Warren Beatty is so cool. Like, the things he's saying about politics are like true, and that's what we're supposed to respond to. But we're not going to go, oh, this cool guy's rapping.
Yeah, this cool guy dressed up like a fucking South Park character and rapping.
Damn it.
The other problem is that this movie attempts to address problems in a way that does nothing but rehash old stereotypes. This inner city was obviously dreamt up by an elderly woman from the Midwest who has never actually met a black person, but has read books where she learned that some of them have hearts of gold and everyone else is a dangerous criminal intent on selling crack to 5-year-olds. Which, by the way, kind of telling on yourself a little bit in this review, because I guarantee you that, like, the people that wrote this movie, I think were probably consciously aware of the portrayal of the various communities that they were portraying in this fucking movie. So, like, you made that comparison. There's a definite generation gap in who likes this movie and who does not. The young, socially aware people that I know think this movie is paternalistic, insulting, and stupid, and that Warren Beatty should just deal with the fact that he is no longer Hollywood's #1 heartthrob. My parents and their friends thought it was great, and that Warren still has this old spark, even though they admitted that Warren and Halle was pretty ew.
It's a movie.
I guarantee you that this woman was an Elizabeth Warren supporter.
Yeah,
a Hillary Warren supporter, 100%. And that's the thing. She talks about the people in her life who think this movie is paternalistic, insulting, and stupid. It's like, yeah, because you talk to shit libs all day, and you are a shit lib. I guarantee you. There is nothing about this review that strikes me as anything other than a woman who probably makes $75,000 a year at some corporate bullshit job. And she goes like, yeah, slay queen, and lives in a gentrified fucking neighborhood.
I don't know that necessarily, because again, this is 2003, right?
Well, I'm saying she does that now.
Okay, probably, but let's look at this even on its own merits. So she wrote this in 2003. This is before a lot of these discussions were in the wider social lexicon. So probably at the time pretty savvy in some ways. I just don't think this person understands satire. People love to say, what's that bullshit that people say when they don't understand a joke?
Oh,
satire requires clarity of purpose and a target, lest it be mistaken for that which it attempts to criticize. Like, yeah, but whenever someone says that, guess what? The satire you're saying that about, it has a clear purpose. You just don't get jokes. People like this, they want all satire to be like the Barbie movie. I hated that fucking movie. That movie's for fucking seals that just clap and orc. That's what's good satire is when a character looks at the screen and says, I'm your friend. I believe the good things that you believe because we're good. And then you go, ha ha ha, yeah, I'm good because I watched this movie. So, like, I don't know. I don't want to speculate too much about this person's, life. I don't know anything about them. But I know they don't fucking get jokes.
No, 100%. And yeah, I mean, that's the thing, Brian, is that if you're telling me that an actress who was one of the most prominent fucking members of a subgenre called mumblecore doesn't understand satire, you're telling me that, Brian? Somebody whose parents both have blue fucking links on Wikipedia, you're telling me they don't understand actual satire, Brian? No, I'm just kidding. It is very funny, though, like, because I knew people back in, like, the mid to early 2010s. And to be fair, I like that sort of, like, late 2000s, early 2010s sort of, like, indie, whatever kind of movie. Everything from, like, you know, comedy to horror or whatever, right? But, like, a lot of those people were, like, bougie, like, fucking coastal lib type people.
Sure, which is kind of fine. I don't begrudge anyone for their parents' money or, like, what privilege they're born into. I really don't.
But it gives a certain viewpoint.
Yeah. I can see why, if you were watching this movie, you'd say, like, this has a paternalistic attitude. But I think the character Bulworth does, because he's going through this breakdown and he's kind of dealing with all of this stuff coming out. But the movie itself, I don't think really treats the people around Bulworth like they're in need from him, you know?
In fact, Bulworth leeches on them.
Yeah, they have to save his ass all the time.
It's kind of the opposite of, like, the magical black man thing.
Well, that guy that we agree is, you know, a hallucination is kind of a magical black man.
Oh, yeah. But here's the difference, though. He's not real.
Which I think leads more into our theory that, like, the movie doesn't have those attitudes, but Bulworth does, because that's the type of guy he is.
Exactly. But yeah, no, I agree for the most part. Like, when people talk about the quote-unquote paternalism of this movie, like, yeah, that's the thing is that, like, and, you know, Bulworth says it in the movie, like, you know, we're looking for a hand up, not a handout. And, like, Bulworth is the one, ironically enough, he's always the one needing a handout from people. I didn't even make that connection until just now, but, like, every single time he's in trouble, like, somebody gives him a handout to basically make sure he doesn't get murdered.
Yeah, that fucking family lets him stay in their house for, like, 3 days.
Yeah, a family that, you know, there's like 20 of them in a house. They're probably not doing all that great.
Feed him a bunch of kale and they tell him it's collard greens.
Exactly. Even though this is just some random man that one of their family members brought home, they still treat him like a member of the family and give him basic human decency, which I guarantee you Bulworth would not do for these people.
Yeah, at least not prior to this. It is like a psychotic break that he's having in the movie.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I don't think there's much paternalism. I think it actually shows, I think, a lot of the fucking humanity that a lot of underserved communities have for people. Because, like, there's kind of a stereotype that, you know, various underserved communities have these certain attitudes or whatever. But I think you'll find that a lot of people who don't have a lot are generally the most willing to give a lot of what they do have to others.
Because that's how communities survive. Any poor community, any marginalized or, you know, victimized community, that's how they survive. They have a willingness to do that. I don't want to be too rough on people who feel like this movie has a paternalistic attitude, because again, like, we're a couple of white guys. I don't know what the viewing experience is like for someone else, but I gotta say, I don't think that this person's opinion is representative. Like, to me, this is a person who doesn't really get what the point of satire is. Because this movie is supposed to make you uncomfortable. The reason that it sometimes borders on racist and anti-Semitic is because Bulworth says racist and anti-Semitic shit. It's intentional.
No, I totally agree with that. And you know who else agrees that this movie is actually very woke, Brian? Is Patricia J. Williams, who was a early proponent of CRT and a legal scholar who gave this movie a positive review in 1998.
Do you have that review for us?
Let me see here. This was one that I kind of wish I had kept around, but I'm going to bring it up here. Let's see if it loads, because I'm looking it up on Wikipedia right now, and the link is taking a while, so I assume it's probably a dead link. But it is from The Nation.
I think I found her.
Yeah, you just have to go to the Wikipedia article. She's in the first paragraph of it. Oh, it's a dead link, unfortunately. But either way, it is cited that she gave this movie a positive review. And once again, she was a early proponent of CRT. And, like, the people that Republicans scapegoat as, like, the woke mind virus today, if one of them genuinely thinks this movie is, like, a brilliant social satire on race, then I'm sorry, your Megan's opinion's pretty irrelevant, in my opinion, on that. You're on the wrong side of history for that particular point. Like, if you want to say anything else, like, you think the romance this movie's stupid, unrealistic, sure, whatever. I still disagree, but hey, whatever, it's a movie. But, like, if you want to say this movie's racist, I don't think there's much strong evidence for that. I really don't.
I think that's part of the thing, is like the awkwardness and the forcedness of the rapping and, you know, the awful things that Bulworth says because he's a career politician. That's where the satire comes in. That's the joke. That's the comic tension of it.
Yeah, it's Bulworth essentially just killing off the retail politician side of himself to say what he really thinks.
Yeah, and it kills him, ultimately.
Ultimately, yeah, exactly. But yeah, so that is the Amazon reviews. It is late as shit. So, Brian, before we sign off in this episode, do you have any final thoughts?
Really highly recommend this to, fans of political satire films. I think if you're a fan of other kind of maligned, strange films we reviewed, I think if you like Observe and Report, not that they're particularly similar in tone or in content, but just in the type of satire they do. If you like Observe and Report as a satirical film, you'll probably like Bulworth. If you like Roberto Bolaño, you probably will like Bulworth. If you like Chapo Trap House, you're probably going to like Bulworth. I mean, I still think this is a mess of a film. It was very well done, but it's clear like one man's vision pushed through, and that you see that the whole time. But God, it's so uncompromising, and it's at times eerily prophetic.
It really is. I agree 100% with that. And now having reviewed this movie twice, I will say this is a movie that I think gets better on every rewatch. There's moments on here that I keep coming back to, and I'm like, oh, I missed that the first time, or oh, I didn't laugh nearly as hard enough at this, or I get a reference I didn't get before. Because also another thing I failed to mention, a lot of the people that are mentioned in this movie, like name dropped, are people that are still in government to this motherfucking date. There's a scene after the debate where he talks about everybody fucking each other to become one color. The news anchor's like, well, now we're going to get to Governor Lamar Alexander. Lamar Alexander was in Tennessee government up until like a year ago. He's been fucking everything in that state, and he finally retired like a year ago.
This is a nightmare. These people will outlive all of us.
Fucking seriously. Okay, no, his Senate career ended in 2021. Okay, but yeah, still, like, every name drop in here is somebody who's basically still relevant in politics 25 motherfucking years later. It's crazy.
It's not that it's prophetic, just...
Nothing's changed.
Nothing changes, it just gets a little bit worse.
Exactly, 100%. And also, I will say to the audience at home that is wondering, like, just why in the world I would want to review this movie twice. That's just how powerful this film is.
I mean, really, I think there's a lot to say about this movie.
There is a motherfucking shit ton to say. Like, the fact that, once again, people are trying to bring up this movie, getting reappraisals all the time. The fact that you're having actual, like, academics review this movie, as Patricia J. Williams did. Like, the fact that people like us, and obviously much bigger podcasts like Chapo Trap House, and, like, this movie is like a time capsule in a way, but it's also, like, almost a timeless movie to a certain extent.
Well, yeah, also because the situation portrayed in this movie is never going to change. Like, it's never going to get better, so you never have to worry about that.
It's a very black pessimist movie. No, I'm just kidding. But... or no, is it Afro-pessimism? I think that's the academic.
Afro-pessimism?
Yeah. Who's the guy that did Anti-Racist Baby? Oh, Ibrahim X. Kendi, yeah. This was, he watched this movie and coordinated his entire political philosophy on this movie. He's like, yeah, when I was coming up with Anti-Racist Baby, I wanted to make an anti-racist baby. Like, Bulworth is an anti-racist senator.
Baby Bulworth.
All right, but yep, so that is our review here. So let's get into our plugs here. You can follow me at Carlos Chantor on Twitter.com. And also, starting as of this week, as we're recording, the show is finally on Spotify now. So listen to us on Spotify, follow us.
Really?
Yes,
and I'm
planning on spreading it to other platforms as well, such as Google Podcasts, maybe Apple Podcasts. I'm looking to spread this around. So that'll take a while because it takes a while to upload 30 plus episodes, but I just started uploading on Spotify. So hopefully by the time this comes out, I'll have every episode at the very least on Spotify. So follow us.
Fantastic.
Millennials Are Old podcast at Spotify.
Follow me at John Stab on Twitter. That's JONSTABB on Twitter.
And also Blue Sky, correct?
Oh, yes, I am J-Lo Biafra on Blue Sky. That's right. Nothing's going on there. Everyone, how everyone said they were leaving for Blue Sky, but no one ever fucking posts there. I am always going to still be posting episodes on there as well, but, I keep forgetting to post there because it's so dead.
Well, it's funny because Musk keeps making Twitter worse, but people still stay.
Yeah, but where are you going to go? People like me who've been on Twitter since 2010, you going to leave to go somewhere else? Nah.
They're all going to go back to something awful. Everyone's going to pay $10 again.
Last time I logged in, I think it was like 2018, and I was miserable just reading posts, and I hadn't logged in for like 2 years before then, and I can't even imagine what it's like going on there now. It's like, when you see the liminal spaces shit on YouTube, that stupid shit, it's like familiar, but it's all different, and doesn't it make you feel a sort of weird nostalgic emptiness? Like, I hate that shit, but that's how I feel. I'm sure if I logged on to SA now, that's how I'd feel. Boy, when I think about something awful and I think about like that point in my online life, it makes me feel old as shit.
Hell yeah. And speaking of old as shit, this will be two old millennials signing off here. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.